Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Widas. I'm a Chief Solution Architect here at Sealights. I have over 25 years experience in R&D, DevOps, customer success. I'm responsible for designing and overseeing various solutions here at Sealights to help our customers to onboard and gain value. What I'd like to talk to you today about is user story code coverage. We're all writing code and we're following user stories, and Sealights is providing now a new ability to actually understand what is being covered by the tests of your user stories. So if we look at code coverage in general today in the market, there are a lot of tools out there which will give you the basic level of code coverage. And that's on unit tests. Tools like Sonar, Jacoco, or in JavaScript, you'll have Mocha and Jest and so on. They'll all give you the code coverage for unit tests, which is nice. But you're checking all the individual parts separately. You're not checking the complete solution of the application. And therefore, what you need to have are the higher level tests like regression, end-to-end, integration, manual tests, different levels based on the different areas you want to check and how close you are to your production and how overall you want to check everything. Sealights, of course, provides code coverage for any test stage, all those test stages, regression, end-to-end, integration, and manual tests. The next level above that is, okay, so you've got 70% overall coverage. Is that good? Well, it depends if your developers are making changes in that 70% area. If they're making all the code changes in the 30%, then that's not that great. On the other hand, you might only have 30, 40% code coverage of all these regression, end-to-end tests, and so on. But those are the areas that the developers are actually touching and hitting. It means you're in a good situation. So code coverage is good, but it's not the real picture. Therefore, we take it to the next level, which is code changes. Okay, so we look at what's changing from one build to the next, from one deployment to the next, and monitoring the code coverage for those changes. And now we can give you untested modified code. Okay, so now you know where the developers are changing. That's the areas that have the highest risk of having defects and issues in them, and understanding what's covered in which test stage, allowing you now to add more tests and so on. Once again, that's also nice, but what happens when you've got a lot of teams working at the same time and a lot of code changes going in, and each team is only really interested in the area that they're working on? You might have certain user stories going on which are behind feature toggles, so right now they're not enabled and so on. You want to understand the picture of a user story, because that is the area you're concentrating on now, the team is working on right now, and you want to know for that specific user story, understand the exact code changes that were made for that user story, and whether those code changes were now covered by those important test stages like the regression, end-to-end, integration, manual, and of course any other test stage that you might have running against this. So what do we have out there today? Okay, so today you've got the user definition, the user story definition being created by product managers. They're giving it to the dev team, which go through the design, code, unit test, component tests, and so on. And then they push that code into a testing environment in order to be tested. Now, on the other hand, you've got the QA team. They also receive the user story definition. They design and develop tests, have their progression tests, have their regression tests, and they're testing those environments which the developers provided the code for, and working, checking where the tests pass, fail, and so on. The question is, these two teams are usually running in parallel and not really connected to each other. I mean, we are moving to Agile, and you've got Agile teams, and they're more integrated one with each other. But still, because we're following two separate paths, nothing really guarantees that the tests that were written for the user story are in fact testing the code that was developed by the developers. Yes, we're following the user story definition, but behind the scene, code is code and tests are tests, and something needs to check and understand, are your tests actually covering all the new code? There could also be code coming in that was not directly defined in the user story, but the developers changed them as part of the user story, which the testers don't really know about, and therefore they need a way to create that link. That's where C-Lights comes into play, and C-Lights can provide you that link. We can understand the user story itself, which we take from tools like Jira. We understand the test that were run, the test code coverage, okay? What was actually hitting the code. And we've got the code traceability from tools from the Git itself, whether it's GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, and so on. And we're creating a link between those three areas of information to provide you a clear understanding of the user story, what was modified there, what was tested, and do you have all the code coverage, all those code changes made for that user story, were they in fact covered or not? How do we do so? Well, we have agents and plugins which you now add to your CI/CD process. So we are not a CI system, we're not a CD system, we're not a testing framework. We link in with what you already have. So if you're working with Cucumber, Selenium to run your tests, you're working with Kubernetes, spinning up Java applications on the back end, you continue doing that. We are not changing that, but we will come up alongside with them, and we will start capturing information. So C-Lights will have an agent which will come up with your test runners, capturing the tests that are actually running. Those tests are, of course, going through some form of front-end web server, hitting your back-end server. On your back-end server, there too, we have our agents, and they're the ones that are actually capturing the code coverage of the tests. Okay, that information is now being fed back into C-Lights. So now C-Lights has an understanding of where the tests were actually hitting the code. Okay, and because we're monitoring the code changes, we also understand what was modified from one build to the next and one deployment to the next, and understand if that was covered. Beyond that, okay, we take the information from the source control itself. Okay, now in the source control, one of the best practices today is when you commit code, the commit itself, the name will contain within it the ID of the ticket that the developer is handling. Okay, so that would be a subtask or a task and so on. And that essentially is providing the link between the ticket itself, what we have in tools like Jira, and the code. Okay, so we're getting that information from your Git. We're understanding what the developers made, which changes they made from your Git for a specific ticket. We get the information from your test management system, for instance, like Jira. Okay, this allows us to understand the hierarchy of the user story itself, or the epic. Different companies would work with a different hierarchy. Let's say you've got your epic. Under your epic, you've got your user story. Under that, you have subtasks and so on. That allows us to build up the tree of information. And of course, we get the code coverage from C-Lights, and that allows us to build the user story reports. Okay. So I'd like to jump into a quick demo over here, showing you what that looks like in a real live environment. Okay, so what we can see here is our Jira. Okay, this is a live Jira instance. Everything here is flowing and changing as our engineers and testers and systems are working. And what we've done is with that script, which is capturing all the information with that data, we're pushing the information back into Jira. So what we can see here, we've added a few fields, custom fields into our Jira. And we're pushing back into here, for instance, the modified coverage. Now, what this means is that it's all the coverage of each user story for all the code changes made on it. But furthermore, we're running a number of test stages. So as I said, you've got your unit test code coverage, but we also capture component test code coverage and sanity test and our nightly tests. All that information is being fed back. And because we want an understanding both overall and without our unit test, we have another entry, which is our non-unit test code coverage. Okay, we can see here an overall picture. If I drill down into one of the user stories, we can see the user story here, and now we get a bit of the breakdown of that coverage information where we can see the same percentages we saw in that summary report. But we get also a bit more detail. So we can see that a total of 90 methods were modified in 12 files. Okay, that's what was modified for this user story. And this is, of course, in a couple of subtasks as well. Out of them, 84 were tested in one or more test stages, and that's what builds up our 93%. Okay. Furthermore, 84 of them were also tested in the non-unit test stages. So we've got also there 93%. Our unit tests only tested 32 of those methods. Component test tested 63, Insanity integration 36, and nightly API tested 40 of them. Okay, so that's how we build up the percentages. We know that there were 90 methods, and for each test stage, how many of those methods were covered by those all the tests in the different test stages. We can drill down even further into a detailed coverage report. So going into this detailed coverage report is now we're linking into our Confluence. Into our Confluence, the same script that is going and updating our Jira information is also generating these Confluence pages. And what we can see here is the same summary that we had over there, and that's on the entire user story. But we also have the breakdown of the subtasks. So we can see here, for instance, we've got two subtasks. Each one, we can get the same type of breakdown of coverage information, and we're also pulling some information from Jira, like understanding the priority and what the status of the subtask is. But furthermore, because we've brought the method information, we're also feeding into here that method information. So we can see in this report the different components that we're capturing coverage for. We don't only capture coverage for one component, we're capturing for all the components within the application itself, because our sanity tests, our nightly tests, our component tests run across multiple components, not just one, like with unit tests. We can see the files that were modified, which methods were modified, who made the modification, and of course, where they were covered, in which test stage. So these 5, for instance, were not covered by any of the test stages. This one was by unit test. This one was by unit test and sanity integration. You can get a complete breakdown exactly what's going on. So we can see, for instance, here we had 5, and down below we have another one, which was not covered by any of the test stages. This, of course, we can also see for the second subtask. Also over here, we can get the breakdown of all the code changes made and what were covered. In this specific subtask, everything was covered. We can even see here that we got 100% of the overall coverage. They were covered in at least one of the test stages, therefore we get the 100%. But now when I'm trying to understand where we need to add more tests, looking at this report, I'm not going to start scrolling down one by one each subtask and so on. And therefore, if we come back to the Jira, we're creating a second report, and that's the uncovered method report. So if I open up this uncovered method report, okay, now we get a subset of all the code that was modified, and in each test stage, which ones were not covered by them. So if we come to the overall, then we get just the summary of those 6. Okay, so now we have a small report which I can work on, and now I know these are the ones that we need to go ahead and add more tests for, or I can investigate and find out that the tests are not needed. Maybe they're behind a feature toggle, maybe there's some other reason why I cannot test, but at least now I have the feedback and the information to understand what's going on. If I'm on one of the teams that actually develops the tests themselves, so let's say I'm on the sanity integration team and I want to understand just what's going on there, I can bring up this report, and now what I'm seeing is a report where just the sanity integration tests did not cover all these items. So you can see some of them were covered by other test stages and so on, and we still have those ones that were not covered by any. And now, as if I'm part of the sanity integration test team, or I want to investigate what's going on with the sanity integration test, I can come and see this subset of results. Okay, that's it in regards to our demo. Okay, and Sealights. Hope you found this very informative and enlightening. And we can move over to some Q&A if we have.
Yes, we do. Thank you very much, Jason. So we do have several questions. The first question we have is, how do you calculate the code coverage? What's the difference? What are the differences between Sealights and Jacoco?
Okay, well, how do we calculate code coverage? Let's take Jacoco as a sample. We have an agent, like Jacoco is a code coverage tool as well, and we instrument code, and that's how we manage to capture coverage. Unlike Jacoco, we have agents for multiple languages, so we don't only capture Java, we also capture in Node, in .NET, in Python, Golang, and so on. So we're giving you across multiple languages, but furthermore, Jacoco is mainly used for unit tests. Coming back to the slide that we had in the beginning, Jacoco will mainly be used for the unit test. Why? Because that's easy, meaning you're running your test, you've got the code which comes up with your test, and Jacoco works perfectly fine there. Yes, with Jacoco, you can also theoretically capture the post-deployment tests, but it's a lot more difficult because now you need to put that agent in the different components, maybe in the different environments. You need to know when you're running your tests. You need to take the reports given by Jacoco, build some kind of script which will aggregate that information together with you, split it out per test stage, and so on. All that work, all that development, all the stuff that you need to be doing there with Jacoco, which is only for Java and very complex to do, Sealights is doing out of the box for you, giving you the different test stages, measuring them automatically for you, giving you in the post-deployment, whether it's in one environment, multiple environments, however components you have with the cross technology between the various components, giving you that information, and not to mention providing you the link back to the user story, which of course Jacoco has absolutely no link back to that information.
Thank you. Is Sealights a static code analysis tool?
So no, we're not a static code analysis. We don't compete with Sonar. Most of our customers have Sonar and continue to work with Sonar or any other static analysis tool out there. We provide code coverage. We're providing you insights to the quality of the tests themselves, and are you actually testing the areas of code. Sonar, great tool for static code analysis, and we recommend you continue to work with it alongside with Sealights.
Thank you. What are the test management tools Sealights can be integrated? Does this support TestRail integration?
Okay, so first of all, we have a number of test runner frameworks that we support out of the box. And that is mainly things that are running with JUnit or TestNG in Java, Cucumber, SoapUI, If we move over to JavaScript, that would be Jest, Mocha. In Python, it's PyTest, and Golang has its own runner in there, which we also support. Those are the ones that we natively connect with, meaning that you don't need to do anything except add our agent and integrate it with those runners. And any other test framework that you have, which are using those runners behind the scene, are of course also supported. For the test runners that we do not natively support, and by the way, we are adding more all the time, we have 4 simple APIs. And virtually every test runner today will have hooks. And you have a hook that says like a test is starting, a test is ending, and so on. You add our APIs to those hooks, and that means that any testing framework that you have, even if it's a homegrown one, by the way, I mean, you wrote your own testing framework, as long as you can integrate our 4 simple APIs into that test runner, you can get the full support of the C-Lights. But even beyond that, I mean, one of the things I mentioned is that we support manual tests. Manual test doesn't really have a test runner. Now, how do we support manual tests, and how can we? And which means that we can support any framework even without your integration, is because all we really need to know is when you're starting and ending your tests. So yes, we can get the test count and the test information and give you all that information. And it can also go to other functionality that we have, like test optimization to reduce your runtimes. But just for the coverage, just what we're seeing here with the user story, all we need to know is when the test stage started and when it ended. So you could just tell us test rail or whatever it might be is starting now, run your tests, our agents on the back end will capture the coverage. You tell us you ended the tests. We now know exactly what the code coverage was for that test stage without any integration or without any change. And we can give you the user story code coverage reports based on that.
Thank you, Jason. It's really simple and seamless integration.
Absolutely.
How do you correlate downstream defects to upstream lack of code change coverage? Can you match the areas of uncovered code changes to, say, end-to-end or UAT defects?
Okay, so as long as we have a link between the code changes being made and the ticket itself, okay, so it could theoretically even be a defect that somebody opened and then the developer makes code changes. And as I mentioned before, I can actually even show you a sample of that. Let's just go out of the full screen. So if we come over here and we look at our GitHub over here, we can see that every pull request here that was made, and every time we commit, we're adding the ticket in over here in the commit itself. And then based on that, we create the link between the code and the ticket itself. Okay, now, because we're measuring the code coverage, and we know the code coverage for the various code, we're getting here, but the link between the ticket and the code. As long as we can get that information, we can provide you the coverage of that ticket, whether it's a bug, user story, or whatever it might be, back to was it covered or not and how much it was covered. We do it across stream, meaning across all the components, even if it was downstream or upstream from the code itself, because as I mentioned, we are linked into all the components, okay? And while we're linked into all the components, if we go back to the architecture over here, we are linked to all the components on the back end. So even when you run the test, and the test now goes through the front end will hit the API gateway, which goes to the next service and to the next service and so on. And the code change you made on a certain service over here, for the user story or the ticket report, whatever it is, we will see the code coverage of that one, but we also captured the coverage of all the other services and the whole traceability of what happened and can give you that report as well. That's, of course, one of the higher level to the reports that we're talking about, where it's not specific to the one user story, but to the entire picture of what's happening and all the code changes being made behind the scene.
Excellent. Next question, how do you understand requirements in Jira tickets?
Okay, so we are not understanding the requirements per se. Okay, what we are understanding is, one, we've got the Git and it's got the ticket. Okay, so now we know, for instance, that this ticket was linked to this pull request. Okay, and that we get from the Git information, and behind that we've got the files that were changed and the methods that were changed. Okay, so we're understanding that information. And by the way, we can see an overlay here of the information that we captured of the coverage of these code changes. So C-Lights knows the code changes. We know the ticket. Okay, when we come back to Jira, this is the ticket itself. And this ticket, okay, this user story, for instance, has subtasks. Okay, so in the subtasks, we've also got these items. And if I'll go into them and look at the report of them as well, we can see in Jira the coverage of those items information as well. So we're not understanding the requirement. We're not understanding what the ticket actually means. We're understanding what code was modified for the ticket that we're getting from Git. We're understanding the structure of the user story and its subtasks that we're getting from Jira. We've got the coverage information that we captured that we're getting from C-Lights. And from that, we're building out the reports and the information that we can provide you for that user story / requirement that you have.
Excellent. For our existing customers that ask how they can start using the user story code coverage analysis, we will reach out to you right after this webinar and set up a meeting to help you integrate this feature. The next question, can you mention more about backend integration of C-Lights to software which is under tests? For example, if there are multiple pods representing multiple microservices in Kubernetes.
Sure. This might get a little technical, so whoever understands, great. Whoever is not, we can help further down the line in further discussions. But let me take you to some of our documentation of integrating with Kubernetes. So this is, for instance, one of our agents that we have for Java. Okay, and in here we have some configuration samples. Okay, now essentially we are a Java agent when it comes to Java. Okay, so we're a jar file, and this jar file needs to be added to your container within the pod within Kubernetes, and we need to come up as a Java agent. Okay, so if we take this setup, for instance, for Kubernetes that we can see over here, what we're doing, from one point of view, we don't want to change your original container. Okay, you have your container, you built it, and we need our agent inside it. We don't want to change that because you don't want to go to production with the agent inside it. So what we're doing here is we first create a container which just has our agent inside it under /download. Okay, by the way, if we scroll down here, we can see the Docker file. This is the Docker file which goes and adds that agent to this Docker. Okay, and we created a container. This container now we bring up as an init container. Okay, that's one of the things that Kubernetes supports. We bring it up as a init container and copy the jar file into the /C-Lights folder. And we create a mount point for this init container. Now, when we spin up our image, which is in our pod in Kubernetes, we have that mount point being mounted in order to work with it. Okay, and then we just have to define C-Lights as a Java agent. In order to do that, we're updating the Java tool options. That's an environment variable which Java knows how to work with, which will update the JVM parameters. We add our agent as a Java agent, and it will do the rest. It will come up, it will scan, it will the code, it will bring us up as an agent to capture the coverage, and that will allow us to capture the information. And this you do for all your pods. Okay, so all the different components, whether it's 1, 10, 50, 300, you bring them up with it. And as I mentioned before, we've got different technologies, which we also support. So also in them, you set them up accordingly. And then all these come up as one big application, and we capture the code coverage across all your entire application for all the components and pods that came up with us.
Thank you. So if we're already talking about support, we did get several questions regarding what languages we support, which CI tools we support. So if you can just give an overview about the testing frameworks we support, the CI tools and the languages, etc.
Okay, so in regards to capturing coverage, so this will be the agent that will capture the code coverage itself. We support Java. We support .NET, and that includes .NET Windows and .NET Core in Linux. Okay, also .NET Core in Windows, but it's usually in Linux. We support Node backend applications, so those will be applications running Node, and also front end for JavaScript. So Angular and React we support. We support Python. We support Golang. And by the way, that can also be proper Golang applications or Lambda Golang, and Lambda also for other languages as well. So I'm talking about Lambda, for instance, in AWS. Okay, so all those various, hopefully I haven't missed any for the capturing coverage, are the ones that we support. In regards to CI tools, virtually any CI tool you have, our integration is not with the CI itself. Okay, we will integrate with your Maven plugin, we'll integrate with your Gradle plugin. All our agents even have command line options. So even if you're not using Maven or Gradle to build your Java, even if you use Java C, theoretically we can support it. For Node and Python and Go and so on, again, we're in the command lines there and integrating. So any CI tool you have, as long as you can run and integrate us as part of the command lines or environment variables for linking us as Java agents and so on, we can link in there. For test runners, as I mentioned earlier, it's JUnit, TestNG, Cucumber, SoapUI, JMeter, I think as well. That's in Java. For Node, that would be Mocha and Jest. For Python, it's PyTest, and for Go, it's the Go runner, which is integrated in the Go language. But by the way, as I mentioned, we have 4 simple APIs, and we have sample integrations for other test runners like Cypress and other ones that I can't remember right now, but never mind. Very simple integration, and we are adding integration for more test runners all the time. If you come and you request a certain test runner and you're a big enough customer, or we see enough of those requests out there with our customers, we're going to be adding them as part of our integration.
Thank you. We have automated tests running on daily basis to check for regression, and then we have unit tests. Will the coverage be combined for these two or separate?
Okay, so each test stage we will capture individually. Okay, so we'll capture the unit test, we'll capture the nightly test, we'll capture the sanity integration test or regression test, whichever you have. Okay, so each one, as we can see also here in our report, we're capturing as a separate one. Okay, based on that information of each of the separate test stages, we know which test stage is capturing each method and each file and so on. We can then build up the aggregation and then give you reports like the non-unit test. So non-unit test would be an aggregation of our component, sanity integration, and nightly tests, or an aggregation of the entire set of modified coverage, which would include all 4 of them. So whichever test stage you have, different environments, different test stages running after every build or running periodically or running ad hoc, we'll capture that information, we'll provide it to you also separately and also aggregated.
So that's a follow-up question to your answer, Jason, from the same person. But then for story coverage will be aggregation of all these?
So that's up to you. I mean, with us in our sample over here, we've got the unit test, component, sanity, and nightly. We're looking on a user story. Okay, so this is one of our user stories. We can see the individual test stage coverage for each one of those test stages. And then with us for Sea Lights, we opted into aggregating also these three. We could have come and said, okay, we want to aggregate just the component and unit test, or we want to aggregate just the sanity and nightly, the exact same way as we aggregated them up for the non-unit test stage, or for the modified having them all. We could have mixed and matched anything we have, and each customer that we come to, we do the same. Okay, so our customers don't have the exact same test stage as we have. Each customer will have different test stages, different types of tests running against different environments. We'll help build up a tailor-made report for them. And if they want to aggregate one or more test stages, they can, and we'll get the reports and see the information accordingly.
Great. We do have some more questions, but for those who asked for a free trial, we do have a free POC. So feel free to go to CLO and request a meeting or send us an email, and we will reach out to you to schedule these. Another question, what about the historical code? Do you have a crawl service that will go and build these links for old code?
Okay, so the problem with old code is that we don't have the coverage information. Okay, so if you're becoming our customer right now, we don't know what happened in the past because we haven't been measuring them. Okay, but let's assume from today you start working with Sea Lights and you start capturing coverage from today and on. And 4 months down the line, you want to come and see what happened 4 months back, which would be today. We're getting the information of the changes for the different tickets and so on from Git. Because Git has that historical information, we get that information from Git. Okay, we use the Git history and Git blame as part of a script to bring out the information to link the different code changes to the different items, or from our scanner, which reported them into our dashboard. And because we've got that historical information, or Git has that historical information, we can build you back historical reports. But that's from the moment you've started working with Sea Lights and you've started capturing coverage. If you want to see whether your test today, okay, so today you're running tests against code that was modified 2 months ago before you were a customer of Sea Lights, that you can get. Okay, but it'll show you the code coverage as of today, not the code coverage you had 2 months ago. Okay, so you can understand, yes, I changed code 2 months ago before becoming a Sea Lights customer. My tests today are covering or are not covering that area of code. That is something that is possible.
Thank you, Jason. Often stories have multiple acceptance criteria. Do you have plans to expand this new functionality so that we can get coverage per AC?
What do you need? Could you elaborate on that a bit? I mean, yes, there's different criteria. We need to know exactly which criteria. Without having further information, I would kind of say yes. Okay, because we're building up the information. We've got the code coverage of the different items and the different areas, the test stages and environments. So let's say you got an environment that you run through, let's say a dev environment, and you run your test there and you want to know at that point, was my user story high enough in coverage? We can give it to you at that point. Then you go in and add another area where you've moved it to staging or something else. We now get more coverage. We got more information. We can go create an updated report. At the end of the day, because we're capturing the information, we're capturing it from virtually any environment you have and any stage you have, take that information through APIs, integrate it back into your own tools, or generate reports like HTML, or push it into Jira or anything else you like, and you can have that virtually at any stage, at any acceptance point.
Thank you. And I think we will have our last question. There are so many, but we will have to answer them later. I'm so sorry. for those that we could not answer. Does the Sealight still provide any recommendations on the code coverage results from various test stages?
Well, depends on what type of recommendations you're referring to. So the basic thing that we're providing, of course, is the untested code. Okay, so you've got code which was modified for the user story and it was uncovered. So of course, that is providing already an insight or recommendation for you to look at that area and understand whether a test needs to be written, and of course, in which test stage it needs to be written. Furthermore, you can mark and you can label information with different levels. So you might have certain area of your code which you want to mark as critical and some as high risk or low risk and so on. And therefore we can link that information also to those labels and that type of information. And then you have an insight to whether the code was critical and also in the user story and also uncovered and so on, and make your decisions. But at the end of the day, Sealight is providing you those insights to what's covered and what's not, how to write the test, who needs to write the test, where you need to write the test. Besides the fact that we told you that it's not tested in that area, would be up to your quality engineers and architects to make those decisions and so on. The type of recommendations we can provide, but that's a completely different story and a different webinar, and we have also those on our site and more information about it, are recommendations in regards to which test to run based on the code changes, but that's less got to do with the user story information here and more with test optimization, which reducing the runtime of your test based on the code changes that were performed.
Excellent, excellent, Jason. So thank you very much for everyone that joined today. Thank you for customers in our new community that joined us today. And thank you very much. Have a great day, and we will answer all of your questions via email right after the webinar. If you want to get a live demo for your team or a free POC, just reach out to sealights.io and request a meeting, and we will arrange it immediately. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bar. Hope you enjoyed that, and we'll be seeing you on following webinars.
Thank you.